Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site that comes from USA Today's NFL Wire. With me on the line is my co-host, Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from SB Nation's family of sites. And Seth is also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. We're in episode 381, the first of two Cardinals-Browns preview shows. This is our preview, picks, and prop bets, although we won't be very heavy on prop bets this time around because of so many injuries. Seth, my goodness, we are here, and wow. This is going to be a very uninspiring matchup this weekend, it looks like. Both teams are playing chicken when it comes to the quarterback position. The Cardinals get a taste of their own medicine, as both the Cardinals and the Browns are saying they don't know who's going to be their quarterback. Kyler Murray, still on PUP, has been practicing. Obviously, we talked about the Josh Dobbs trade. Clayton Tune talking like he's the starter. My guess, Clayton Tune, I'm about 95% confident in saying that. While the Browns, they got Deshaun Watson back at practice on Wednesday with a limited participation tag. And if it won't be him, then it'll be P.J. Walker. But it feels like it's probably going to be P.J. Walker versus Clayton Tune, that's border. Like a game where we're supposed to get Kyler Murray versus Deshaun Watson. That's a premier quarterback matchup. If we get Clayton Tune versus P.J. Walker, that is shades of, Ryan Lindley, Greg McElroy, Vinny Testaverde, Tim Rattay. That's the type of vibe this game is getting right now.
Yeah, and it's just, it's not overly shocking on the Cardinals end, right? But it is a little bit surprising to see that Deshaun Watson's still struggling with that arm injury, and we'll see how that plays out for him, because he tried to go against Indy, I believe it was, a couple weeks ago, and just couldn't do it, and basically re-injured it. I talked to my buddy who's a physical therapist, who I'm actually seeing right now, and he was like, that's an injury that takes, like, if you're a pitcher, usually like 6 to 8 weeks. Like, it's not a full season thing, but it's like, 6 to 8 weeks, get your, get to feeling better. And, obviously a pitcher and a quarterback throw differently, blah, 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 but it's still throwing the ball. It's still in that, shoulder scapula area, and you're having strain and issues on that. It's unfortunate. And then, of course, Murray, we talked about it, like, does it make a lot of sense to play him in Cleveland against this defense?
And I know, Gannon says it has nothing to do with who we're playing, but about him being ready. But this would sound like a crazy person to bring Kyler back, with that defense, with James Conner out, Emari Demercado been hurt all week. Michael Wilson, you have no weapons for him. Zach Ertz is on injured reserve. Not that he was doing a whole lot, but it would feel like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and so we end up with potentially P.J. Walker versus Clayton Tune. We end up with Jerome Ford versus Keontae Ingram, Tony Jones. Yeah, so the under is set at 37.5 right now, and I feel like that's an easy under, unless we hear some positive growth from guys like DeMarcado and Wilson heading into the game, because it's just getting to the point of absurdity, which is unfortunate. But what we kind of expected coming into this year in terms of, well, if the main guys aren't healthy, it's going to be ugly, right?
Yeah, this game's going to be rough. So let's kind of talk about what the Browns are. And the Browns are a banged-up group. We understand how that goes. Obviously, we've been talking about the quarterback position, Deshaun Watson. He's played in 4 games this season. They're 3-1 in those games, but he hasn't looked good. Like, he hasn't looked anything like the Deshaun Watson in Houston. Now, I had an interesting conversation on one of the preview shows that's going to be coming on Saturday. I already recorded that one with Max Loeb over at the Believe in Browns podcast, who actually does the podcast with former Browns running back and returner Eric Metcalf, who played for the Cardinals for a year in 1998 as well. But he had an interesting take in the fact that he's always felt, and he said it for a long time, that Deshaun Watson's, like, his statistical parts were inflated from being on bad Texans teams that were always behind. And so some of the dynamic play, now what you saw, the eye test said great quarterback, but he hasn't even come close to that yet. Last year he looked pedestrian, and this year he's been average at best.
Yeah, banged up and average. And, it's one of the things that I think a couple fans have talked about it, and obviously, something that we have never really thought about it, but because we've never questioned whether Kyler Murray would be back this year. But it's an interesting, it's interesting to look at it and say, hey, this is basically what you're advocating for with, not playing Murray for the full season, right? Like, obviously, if he's not healthy, that's a different conversation. But, this is...
But Watson went a year and 2/3 without being in a football game.
And if you don't play Murray this year, you're basically getting to that length of time, right? So why would you want to do, like, you see how it can cause issues and potentially, sabotage an otherwise talented team. And obviously the Browns had no control over Watson playing or not playing. And that's a conversation for another show that isn't, talked about by Jess and I, but like, the whole idea that you're just going to come back in after sitting out a year plus and be like, oh, I'm the same guy, look at me go, is just I don't know. It's kind of funny to think that that's something that people really think can happen. Yeah, but you look at this Browns team, their offense has been plagued by just unfortunate circumstances. Like you brought up the Deshaun Watson situation.
Nick Chubb. Oh my
Nick
gosh.
Chubb. Thankfully, the leg didn't die, which most people thought happened when they saw it live, right? Like, everybody was just like, well, he'll never play another down again. And that may be just because of the injury itself, but it's one of those situations. And then from there, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was
awful in his start.
And that's, I think, another great kind of, hey, let's all kind of slow our roll a little bit, right?
Right. Because remember, the Browns traded Josh Dobbs to the Cardinals because of DGR's preseason.
Right, and then they had to be like, hey, guess what?
Well, and here's the thing. Remember how everyone was ready to just put Clayton Tune out there? DTR had a way better preseason than Clayton Tune did, and as inconsistently and some of the bad play we've seen from Josh Dobbs, guess what? Tune isn't even at that level. I'll say this. Tune might hit some downfield throws better than Dobbs then, and even then, I was looking at some stats from Touchdown Wire that wrote up, gave a grade for the Vikings trade for Josh Dobbs and gave it a B, that his deep throw numbers weren't off, like 11 for 30 completion, which wasn't terrible. And we know that if he'd have connected on 3 more, then we'd be looking at some elite numbers, but he was terrible in the intermediate throws.
Yeah. And so that's, that's what the Browns have dealt with. But on the flip side is they have an elite defense, number one in
Yes.
yards, in defensive yards allowed in the NFL. I know some people don't like to use that metric, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But like, they're phenomenal in every
But
phase
they're
of
a top
defense.
10 defense scorings too. So as long
Right.
as long as the disparity isn't like last week with the Cardinals, they only gave up 268 yards but 31 points. That's that's where yards don't matter because you're not stopping him. Yeah, that defense is so physical. And if you look at it, that's kind of what's kept them because their offensive play has been pedestrian. Their quarterback play has been Like Deshaun Watson wasn't great, 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. The other two quarterbacks, 1 touchdown and 8 interceptions.
Yeah, and even last week they lost the game simply because of a decision PJ Walker made.
Yeah, Walker was picked off twice.
Well, and if you go back and watch that game against the Seahawks, they were leading 2017, and I think there was less than 2 minutes to go, and they got picked off, and people are like, why are you throwing the ball? And it's like, well, like we talked about with Dobbs, like at some point you have to be able to run your offense still. Like it doesn't matter who the quarterback is, you still need to be able to run your offense, and PJ Walker hasn't allowed that to happen. It was literally, I'm looking at the play sheets right now. It was literally 3rd and 3 with 2 minutes to go, and they threw the ball, and Julian Love intercepted it. So it was either the Browns win or not, and that's happened. So, but you look at it, their defense keeps them in games, and they're obviously led by Myles Garrett, who's one of the best defensive players in the NFL.
This pass rush is different in the fact that Baltimore gets it from everywhere, and they led the NFL in sacks going to that game with 29. The Browns don't have as many. They have 20 sacks, and 8.5 of those come from Myles Garrett alone.
Yeah, and then Zadarius Smith hasn't been what they had hoped he would be. Alex Wright hasn't taken that next step.
Okoronkwo has 2.5 sacks, so he's a speed guy. Like he's like a third down speed rusher.
Yeah, and so you look at those guys, and it hasn't been exactly what they were hoping for. But at the same time, when you have Myles Garrett, it doesn't matter, right? Like you're just like, well, I got Myles Garrett. On the flip side, they've got good defensive backs. Denzel Ward is elite. Martin Emerson is coming into his own, and Greg Newsome's been a nice slot corner and a guy that's worked out well there for them. And then they have good safeties in Grant Delpit and Rodney McLeod, and so they're just a talented overall. Or sorry, Juan Thornhill's their other safety. That's right. So Grant Delpit, Juan Thornhill, and they're just a talented group. I would say their like weakest area is probably their linebackers. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is, he's fine. He's not.
And Taki's fine as well.
Yeah, and then Anthony Walker. And so like they've got, 3 guys that are super athletes, but I wouldn't say that they're, elite linebackers like last week where you had Roquan Smith, who's probably the best linebacker in football right now, and then a very good Patrick Queen as well.
Yeah, and one thing that we looked at last week with the Ravens is how they had their weakness in run defense, and we actually saw it. We saw that in the first half, is that the Cardinals were able to run the ball successfully, and it's what basically, aside from the aided that first drive with that penalty on third down, is that the ability to stay on schedule with the run game limited their pass rushing. Cleveland is a better statistical run defense team. In fact, they are 8th in the league in rushing yards allowed, 96.7. So they allow less than 100 yards per game, but the yards per carry is right at 4 yards. So that's it. They're not shutting people down by any means. It will be interesting. I will say this: once you take the run factor out of Josh Dobbs, Clayton Tune is a very athletic quarterback, but I think he is a less of a. I don't know. stylistically, I think Dobbs took advantage of his not only running ability but his quickness. I don't think is Tune the quick athlete that Dobbs is. I know he can run, but is he more like a Josh Allen runner?
Right. And, you look at it and you've got a really good front, but they're, like I said, they're a little undisciplined. They make up for it with athleticism. 15th in yards per carry against. So, basically middle of the pack, which is fine. They thrive on getting guys in second and third and long. So like they are really aggressive early in downs to try to get you into that, second and plus or third and plus six territory. And because then that way they can use their speed, athleticism, and then obviously Myles Garrett to come after you. So like you're saying, like you have to be able to get positive even 3 yards and first down, and then 3 yards and second down, because third and four is a lot different than third and seven plus. Totally. And then on the flip side, on offense, we mentioned it earlier. Obviously the devastating injury to Nick Chubb, probably one of the best running backs of the past decade. He's just been otherworldly, and to see him go down with the injury he did was it was tough. And the last 5 years you're talking about a guy that's consistently putting up 1,200 yards, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And so they went and they had Jerome Ford. He was their backup, and he's done a nice job, but he's obviously not Nick Chubb. and you can see that. I mean, last week in the loss to Seattle, 9 for 37. In their win over Indy in that shootout, he went for 11 for 74, but like he's not the big play guy threat that Chubb is. I mean,
would you say that Ford is very kind of in the same mold as a DeMarcado? Reliable.
Yeah, he is, and so that's what you get from him, and you see it consistently. And then they brought back Kareem Hunt, who's just kind of a shell of himself now, right? He's not the same guy anymore, and so you just look at it from that way. Pierre Strong is kind of starting to take a little bit more of those carries. He had 10 for 41 last week. The week before, 8 for 25. And you look at what Kareem Hunt did. He had 14 for 55. So yeah, he has more carries, but it's just he's kind of turned into a plotting kind of goal line back, if that makes sense. Less than 4 yards a carry in every game he's played in the season, and like we do with Josh Dobbs, and even though he's been in Cleveland and stuff, you can be like, okay, we'll take out the first 2 games where you're out of shape coming off the couch, and but San Francisco, good defense, obviously, 3.9 yards per carry. That Indy game, the other backs are averaging 5-6 yards a carry. He's averaging 3. And then like I said last week, he was under 4 yards a carry again. He's just not the same guy, and so they're trying to get a little more juice. And I think that's where Pierre Strong comes in. And you're noticing, like, we're talking about a lot of running backs because, as you mentioned, PJ Walker's been really bad. And I think it's one of those situations where we saw kind of a similar thing to what they're doing with what the Cardinals did with Josh Dobbs, outside of that Dobbs actually produced a little better. But you look at it, I mean, in the first 2 games, a win over San Francisco, he was 18 for 34. That's 53% with 2 interceptions, and they won that game. Against Indy, he goes sub 50% completions and throws an interception. They won that game. And then it finally caught up with them, 15 for 31, sub 50% again. His first touchdown pass of the year, but 2 more interceptions. And they lost that game, and really they lost that game because of him and his inability to make plays. in the passing game. And so I think what they're doing is just they're trying to preserve what could be with DTR as opposed to what is with PJ Walker. So we'll see how that goes, because they still have talent at the wide receiver position. Obviously, they just traded Donovan Peoples-Jones, who was coming off a career year last year, but they have Amari Cooper, who's a legitimate, true, bona fide number one receiver, on pace for 1,000 yards again. David Njoku is a good tight end, a good athletic weapon. He's averaging 4 catches per game, on pace for about 800 yards this year. And then you have Elijah Moore, who they traded. I can't remember what type of draft pick. I know they traded a draft pick for him. He was a second round pick of the Jets and never really blossomed there. Who could blame him? But he's never really, found his niche right now in Cleveland. He's got 250 yards receiving on the season in 8 games. Not great. It is what it is. But
well, you can think the passing numbers are underwhelming.
Yeah.
Just like with the Cardinals, honestly. It's very similar. Like we know that Hollywood Brown is a very good receiver and his numbers are pedestrian, but they should be much better.
Right. But you also look at it and it's simple things, like you said. You look at what they did with Donovan Peoples-Jones last year. He had 840 yards receiving, and this year he had 97, and they traded him. And Njoku last year had over 600 yards. He's got under 300 this year. Moore's the only one that's kind of on pace for what he has been, but that doesn't change who these guys are. And Amari Cooper is a freak. I mean, Amari Cooper's, a phenomenal wide receiver. He put up over 1,100 yards last year. He's, on pace again for right under 1,000 yards, but he's averaging almost 16 yards per reception. That's just that, he has 30 catches on the season.
Yeah.
So it makes it really hard. And so, this is a pretty simple game, and we say this every week, but if the Cardinals can ask PJ Walker to beat them, you have a chance. The thing is the thing that Cleveland does pretty well is that they're a good run blocking team. I don't know if is Joel Bitonio back or is he still out?
He was one of the guys on the injury report on Wednesday. Let me see if it's.
And then I know their other guy I think is hurting too.
Bitonio, no, he's good. Bitonio just was rest. He was a rest day yesterday. He had no designation today.
And then Jedrick Willis.
Let's see, Jedrick Willis. He upgraded. He was out yesterday, limited on Thursday.
Okay, so I mean that's the thing is their offensive line is big, talented, and physical, and they run the ball well. And you go Jedrick Willis, Joel Bitonio, Ethan Pochik, Wyatt Teller, who's an All-Pro, and then big DeJuan Jones, who's been a revelation as a rookie, 4th round pick, and it makes it tough, man. So that's what the Cardinals have to do is they have to ask PJ Walker to beat them. They have to do a good job against the run and force PJ Walker to beat them, force PJ Walker to throw, and then you have a shot. It doesn't mean you'll win, but you have a shot. But at the same time, we look at it and it's easy to talk about, right? Like, can you do enough on offense against what is an elite defense?
Yeah. Coming up next on the Rise Up C Red podcast, the Star Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move and look a bit about keys, matchups, and more. That's coming up next on Rise Up C Red. We're back on the Rise Up C Red podcast, the Star Cardinals talk on the web. Keys and matchups. Seth already brought up some, but obviously, I mean, offensively, especially when we're looking at Clayton Tune, we got no Emari DeMercado. I mean, they have to somehow find some success running the ball because you can't. The Cardinals will stand no chance if Clayton Tune has to drop back 40 times. Do they?
Oh yeah, that's a recipe for
well,
disaster.
Honestly, and we'll talk about predictions. This has the makings of a terribly ugly game that I think might only be enjoyed and not even enjoyed by the fans of the local teams. Like Browns fans and Cardinals fans will be the only people who would ever watch this game.
Right.
And I even think many of them will be like, "Ugh, this is bad."
But it's also a game that, like, and we'll get to, like, there's just not a lot to even like bet on to like try to make it interesting, right?
No.
Like this is just a bad matchup between two teams that are kind of polar opposites, or I guess you could say the exact same.
Like right now, they are basically the same. Without like the Cardinals are a great value version defense of the Cleveland defense right now.
Right, exactly, and that's kind of where it's at. Like you just look at it and you go, I have no idea what to expect. This is one of those games where you just kind of go into it and you say, okay, where does everything fit? And it starts, up front. Can the Cardinals control the line of scrimmage enough to force PJ Walker to beat them? That's a legitimate question that has to be answered, and that means they need, Zaven Collins, Victor Dimukeji. We haven't heard anything from Dennis Gardeck in a couple of weeks, right? He's been basically silent and stopped. And then Dante Stills has to continue to play well.
Yes.
If those things don't happen, then, it's going to be one of those situations where you're going to see Jerome Ford run for close to 100 yards, and you're going to see Pierre Strong, over 60 yards, and Kareem Hunt's going to run for 35 yards on 10 carries and 2 touchdowns. Like that's what it's going to that's what it's going to look like if you can't, make plays at the line of scrimmage. And then can Marco Wilson, Starling Thomas, Antonio Hamilton, Garrett Williams slow down Amari Cooper? That's really the only guy that's been a consistent, like you said, very similar to Marquise Brown, like legitimate, true wide receiver ones, game changer type guys that just haven't had the quarterback play that they've needed to produce at the level that you would expect from a wide receiver one. And, and again, I feel like Jalen Thompson, Kaiser White, Josh Woods, Buda Baker will do a good enough job on David Njoku, but can the Cardinals, that front 4/3, create enough havoc in the run game? And then the flip side is, can the Cardinals do anything offensively? I mean, it's easy to say it's offense versus defense, but you look at it, obviously the biggest one is DJ Humphries going to be able to hold up against Myles Garrett. I mean, we're talking about perhaps the premier pass rusher in the NFL, right?
And in fairness, Garrett pretty much, like, he's at the edge on first and second down, but he's
inside, yeah.
All of those linemen are going to have to deal with Garrett, all of them,
right? And so those are legitimate questions that have to be answered if we're going to see this team even compete. And this is it's very similar to last week in terms of what we're looking at, but it's different in the sense of there's one guy. There is Myles Garrett, and he's a freak, and he's been a freak every game. He hasn't had any issues this season, right? Getting his pass rush off and being the dominant force. So can the Cardinals find a way to slow him down? And that's not, a negative thing. That's just a realistic thing.
Yeah, and that's where being able to find some modicum of success in the run game, so you're not 3rd and 7, but you're 3rd and 4.
Right, because you just can't. I mean, the reality is you just can't let him pin his ears back and go, because it doesn't matter if you've got, a prime Trent Williams there. Like, that dude wins, and we saw
in the preseason that Tune will make a read mistake, like that one the final preseason game when he just got leveled on an unblocked blitzer that he just didn't know was coming.
Right, and again, that comes back to them being able to protect him, and that comes back to them being able to get him in position to be successful, and we'll see how that all works out. But right now it's been less than optimal. And so we'll see how they work it. But, I think when you look at the whole situation, they're in a position where they could probably keep up. But like you said, it's gonna have to be a team effort. They're going to have to get something out of their run game. And if they're missing, obviously if Kyler's not playing like we expect, and then they're missing Amari DiMercato, it's going to be a lot to ask these new guys, or guys like Keontae Ingram, who have not done it yet, to do it. And so that's what it's going to come down to.
I think an intriguing individual matchup to watch is Hollywood against Denzel Ward, assuming that he would be the one most likely to do it. Emerson is a possibility, but I think they like him more for size. And if it were Michael Wilson's playing, you like to see that matchup. It'll probably be Zach Pascal out there, or maybe even a little bit of we'll probably see a lot more tight end stuff. So Trey McBride, I think, then becomes really, really important in this game.
Well, and I don't think we expected or even understand what Michael Wilson has meant to this offense, even though his numbers are incredibly modest, because he is kind of the guy that gives them a big body play type of guy. And so we'll see, man. Like it's a rough week to be very injured, right?
Yeah, well, both teams are ridiculous right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, we knew that this was happening, for the Cardinals this season. But at the same time, we didn't expect it to be this drastic, right?
No. Coming up next on the Rise Up C Red podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. It's time for predictions. Picks, predictions, and some minor prop bets. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web. Time to make our picks and predictions. If you had to pick, Seth, before we go to the score, how many turnovers do we have in this game combined?
5.
I say 4. And both teams will have them. I can almost guarantee. I don't think there was a prop for turnovers, but
not yet, man.
But I feel this game is going to be mistake ridden. How many missed field goals? Will there be any missed field goals?
There is. Okay, sorry. There are some props for fumbles lost. That's it though.
I don't know.
So there's no interceptions or anything. They're probably not going to put them on the board this week. They're like, we ain't
well, until they know, until they know for sure who's playing quarterback. I think that's the
standard operating procedure. So I think when you look at it, you're going to see at least one Dustin Hopkins. But again, like even in these games, we don't have any kicking props.
No,
which is crazy.
Although I was so like, come on, like we've been hammering the kicking props, and then they're like, nope, not this week.
Yeah, right. So I mean, there's a couple situations, and we'll see how this all kind of plays itself out. But I think right now, it's like you said, it's going to be a sloppy game. There's still. It's Cleveland. I was harping on it the other day. Weather in the Midwest is so much different than here, but and there's a slight chance of rain, but it's definitely supposed to rain on Monday, which means it could rain on Sunday. And so you have to look at that and go, well, we'll see how it goes, because it's already going to be sloppy, right?
Yeah. Though the interesting fact, that the Browns have not beaten the Cardinals since 2003.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing that both you and I think that changes this weekend.
Yeah.
And by the way, the games we've been most confident in losses in, we've been wrong. The Cowboys game, and then
we thought that the Ravens were going to blow them out of the water.
and they just like didn't show up. And so we're very confident in what's going to happen, but there, as much as it is a cliche, like the any given Sunday thing is real, because you're talking about the human element of things. And so we'll see how that works out, because like you said, the kicking game kind of favors the Cardinals. The Cardinals have done a really nice job in terms of making it difficult the last 2 weeks on offenses. I won't say they've done a good job offensive or defensively. I think that's strong, but there's been improvements, and they're making teams work harder to get what they're getting.
Yeah.
That being said, we look at it.
So there's an 8.5 point spread. I mean, we both feel the Cardinals will not win this game. But do you think that the Browns cover?
And it is down to 7.5 on DraftKings right now.
It's still 8.5 on BetMGM. 7.5. That's interesting. Especially if it's PJ Walker, I have no confidence in the Browns offense to be able to pull away.
No, not whatsoever.
And so if we're at plus 8.5, I very much like the Cardinals at plus 8.5.
Yeah, and you look at it, it's a tough I don't think people realize how bad he has been to get to that, part or that point where you and I are both like, ugh, like this is like, because it's a lot easier when you're talking about Geno Smith, who's, has a record or a track record of playing extremely well, or you obviously have Lamar Jackson, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like those guys are easy to look at and go, oh, okay, this guy's phenomenal. But on the flip side, to see PJ Walker over there, you're like, PJ Walker's going to beat them? Like, come on.
He's done it before. He is 1-0 against the Cardinals.
Yeah. But that's the thing too, is like, that was a fluky.
Well, that was the that was the PJ Walker started, but Cam Newton played game.
Yeah, and it was a fluky thing in the sense that that the Cardinals just didn't play well at all that game, right? Like it was just a bad game. And so, I look at it, I don't 7 and below I can see. So a touchdown gets you a push. 6, and below, I can definitely see that. I'm even comfortable taking that. But man, over a touchdown, just the way that they've played, it just seems like a lot to ask, because you look at their wins with PJ Walker, and it's not like they're winning impressively.
It's one win. They've had one
right.
win when he started.
Right. No, because they beat the 49ers when he came in. Or he started that game, didn't he? Against the Niners?
According to this,
I thought he did, but maybe I'm wrong.
They are 3-1 when Watson starts, 1-1 when PJ starts. And so I'm guessing
he that's right. He didn't. No, he didn't start the Indy game. That's right. Because Watson got knocked out.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. But I mean, Watson played one series and threw an interception. So, but my point being on that, and I know that San Francisco is a far superior team to Arizona, so it's kind of night and day. But you look at it, they won that game 19-17. They beat
and
Indy.
Only won that because Jake Moody missed the field. Like Brock Purdy having a terrible game took them down for a game-winning field goal, and Moody just went.
And then you look at the next week, and they beat, even though there's a lot of points, and I don't think you and I see this happening, they beat Indy 39-38. And so you look at both of those situations, and you're not talking, covering 8.5. And I know the Cardinals are bad. I'm not disputing that reality, but 8.5 is a lot, man, for a team that has not won by more than that since week 3 in this season.
And that was their one game. You're like, oh, Watson might have it.
Yeah, and I don't even think did he play that well that game? Yeah, he played well that game. Okay. That was his best game, you're right. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I mean, you're just looking at it and you're just I mean, they beat or they lost the Ravens by 4 touchdowns. And like I said, 3 points combined to beat San Fran and Indy. Like it's not like are they the superior team? I don't think you and I would dispute that in the least. I think we'd both be like,
honestly,
absolutely.
I think this game has a chance. Like the Cardinals could win this game just because of how bad Cleveland's offense and if Clayton too does anything at all. I'm not predicting a win, but I do like the Cardinals to cover. In fact, I even like it. Like even if it's down to 7, I still like the Cardinals to cover. I think it's going to be a 3 or a 4-point game. Like my personal pick is I don't know which score to say. I don't want to say 21-17. I kind of want to say that, but that means 3 touchdown drives by the Browns. And I feel more confident in them doing 2 touchdown drives and 2 field goals. So either 2017 or 21-17. But also, which means I have no confidence in the total because it's set at 37.5. And right. I can't pick whether it's going to be 2017-37 or 21-17, 38. So if that total climbs up to 40, okay, if it climbs up to 40.5, maybe 39.5, I'd be willing to hit the under on this game. But I think this will be just an incredibly ugly game with both teams 20-17, 21-17. One of those 2 scores, it'll be that. And both quarterbacks will look bad. And Tune will have a couple of moments, but I think overall it'll be you.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I do think that Cleveland wins and covers only because I'm thinking more about how they have looked on defense, and I think that starting a rookie in this situation that they end up, you do see some mistakes and they end up getting a defensive score. So I've got it 23-10 okay. Cleveland. With a defensive score. So 2 offensive scores or 1 offensive score, 2 defensive or 1 defensive score, and then 3 field goals.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a lot of scoring drives. So in terms of props, there is, because I had to do that for our network article that we do every week for Touchdown Wire, where every editor makes a bet on the game related to the team. And there are no player props. Absolutely no player props right now because too many players are injured. Their status is just too up in the air. The one that I picked that I felt really good about, I feel really good about this one actually, and has really nice plus odds. It is both teams scoring 1 or more touchdowns in the first half. And if we just look back at the Cardinals trends, they've scored a first half touchdown in all games but the Rams game. So in 7 of 8 games, they've scored a first half touchdown. Feel confident about that. They have also allowed a first half touchdown in 6 of their 8 games. And so at plus 130, I really like that. That if of anything else, I'm like, that's a really good value for something that seems like it seems like a really good bet.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and that's one to definitely watch. There are a few player props on DraftKings, and the only player props they're offering on DraftKings right now are touchdown scorers. So the first one I would look at, because one of the things I think you and I have been most impressed with this year is the opening script. We've seen them do an excellent job putting their offense or defense in a position to make plays early in a game. Now, after the opening script, yes, it's been ugly to unwatchable at times. However, the Browns are heavy number favorites to score the first touchdown. The Cardinals are much different. Amari Dimercado is still their top guy at plus 1,200. He may not even play. I don't know if you're going to see Marquise Brown or Trey McBride score the first touchdown. That seems like a lot to ask.
Is Tune mentioned in those?
He is. And so that's where I was going to go with this. So Keontae Ingram right now is plus 1,800. Rondell Moore is plus 1,800. And Clayton Tune is plus 2,500.
Ooh, those are juicy.
And so it's, obviously something you want to bet very, very little on. Maybe $5 like max type of thing where you're, winning $70 on a $5 bet, or, if Clayton Tune hits $125, right? But the other one that I do like is Clayton Tune anytime touchdown, in case the Browns do get the ball first and are able to kind of establish a run dominant thing. Clayton Tune anytime touchdown scores plus 650. Ooh. So those both are intriguing to me. From there, I mean, you kind of got a lot of chalk. Like I said, if you want to do first touchdown for the Browns, plus 650 for Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt is actually still a really good number. Just obviously you're not going to be able to get as much. I'm actually surprised. And so take a look at BetMGM if and when they put these player props up. Jess and I are predicting, guessing Saturday after inactives are announced. Once they confirm that, Deshaun Watson won't play and that Kyler Murray won't play. But Kareem Hunt, 2+ touchdowns, plus 950, Jerome Ford, plus 1,200. I think that's a little low, especially for Hunt. You want to be plus 1,000 on any of those. So, if you get that on BetMGM, I think that's a better one. But one I do like, Kareem Hunt plus 3 touchdowns, and neither Jess or I think it's going to happen. But if they do score 3 touchdowns in their methodical plotting drives, and it's Kareem Hunt, he's plus 5,000. The Cardinals have given up 3 touchdowns to 2 players this year. So that's not necessarily a bad bet. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey had 4, and then last week Gus Edwards had 3. So it's definitely not the worst bet. And then, you look at those, it's just, I think those are the nice ones. It's interesting because the Cleveland Browns defense special teams to score touchdowns. So something I've talked about, plus 2,200, or sorry, plus 550. So really, really, really not good juice on that, because you're talking about a defense scoring, even though I think it's going to happen. It's just, I don't like the return on that. So those are ones I like, looking at it, but there's some intriguing lines.
I like the winning margin. There's a couple of bets I like. And if you want to take both to kind of hedge one against the other, Browns 1-6, that's like my range. Browns 1-6, which is plus 310, or Browns 7-12, which is your range of the victory at plus 350. Where if you make 2 even bets on either one for both of those, then you're still hitting at about 155 plus 160 in those winnings. Assuming that the final score falls into that the Browns win by between 1 and 12 points.
Yeah, and this is it's a strange week because we just don't have very much to go off of, right? And so when you look at it, you're guessing and kind of hoping, and we'll see how it works out, because this is the first week we haven't had a lot of props. So we're hoping next week, when Kyler Murray's back officially, that we'll see that flip. But for now, I don't, it's not the best preview for the props that we could have offered, because there's just not very many to choose from, man.
There aren't. And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. We have Max Loeb from Believe in Browns podcast network podcast coming up tomorrow. Seth and I will return on Tuesday night recording, which means you will get it likely on Wednesday sometime. This is episode 481. We're almost at 500 shows, Seth. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. We will be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.
Rise!